Welcome. We are now streaming live. This is Owl Freedom Teachings. I am with Blue Heron Woman. I'm Julian Katari, and we are getting more and more ready to make the final jump into freedom. And we want to invite you for that. And to do that, we have all of these conversations. Today is the 233rd conversation. And we're going to begin talking about how sitting in a chair, and that's why we have Blue Heron Woman here, not in a chair.
Yeah.
I myself was doing some artwork on the floor last night for a calendar that we're preparing for the people that join our Aloha Nirau Living, and so we're going to talk about how that is all the technical aspects of how sitting in a chair is not good for you, and a lot of other things regarding holistic wellness. So welcome to today's topic and conversation and investigation.
Yeah. So why your body treats sitting like a disease. That's what we're going to explore first. So if you've been sitting longer than 45 minutes, the blood flow in your leg arteries has already dropped. Not because your heart is pumping less, because the blood vessel it stretches has changed. The single layer lining the artery has reduced the production of the molecule that keeps the vessel open. So the arteries have partially constricted. Your blood is now moving slower through narrower pipes, and the damage began before you felt anything. And the damage reoccurs after every 45 minutes of sitting. The cycle repeats every time you sit down for more than 45 minutes throughout the rest of your life. So let's talk about the physics of this, starting with an organ that none of us know we have. We can't see, we can't feel, and have never been told we have it. There is a single layer of blood cells lining every blood vessel in our bodies. If we removed every single one of these cells and laid them flat, they would cover about 5,000 square meters, about a football field, right? This organ is called the endothelium. It's a metabolically driven organ, and it's the largest organ in our body by surface area. It's larger than our skin, and it constantly produces compounds that regulate our blood vessel diameter, our blood clotting, our inflammatory state, and the permeability of our blood vessel walls. No doctor has ever pointed to this organ on a diagram or told us what it does, and they never will. At least in our lifetime, probably. It has no shape. It is a surface, not a structure, and it's distributed across every blood vessel in our body. It's invisible to imaging, so they can't look at it by X-ray or MRI or anything like that. It's too thin to feel, and it's too dispersed to really locate. And yet, it's the organ whose function determines whether your arteries remain open and flexible or narrow and inflamed. So this organ you've never heard of or seen is the organ that stands between you and the disease that kills more than any other humans, or more humans than any other cause on Earth. Every heart attack, every stroke, and blood clot events begin with the failure of the epithelium in the legs. The organ, I said that. So the single most important compound that the endothelium produces is called nitric oxide, and its primary function is to relax the arteries, to increase their diameter, and reduce the resistance which our heart pumps against. Nitric oxide is also an anti-inflammatory. So the molecule that keeps our vessels open is also the molecule that keeps them healthy. When blood flows naturally, the shear stress, and this is not S-H-E-E-R, it's S-H-E-R, the shear stress, like a waterfall flowing against rocks. That shear stress activates, causes the endothelium to deform, and it triggers an enzyme that makes nitric oxide. So every step we take, every time our calf muscle muscles contract and push blood through our leg arteries and veins. The friction causes our endothelium to deform, and the nitric oxide activates, or the enzyme activates, and nitric oxide is produced, and the arteries and veins remain in their protective state. When the blood flow decreases, as it does during prolonged sitting, and the legs are motionless and the calf muscles are inactive, that shear stress drops below the enzyme activation threshold, and nitric oxide production fails. The arteries constrict, anti-inflammatory protection disappears. So after sitting continuously for 1 hour, mediated dilation of your arteries is reduced by half. It's detectable in 30 minutes, and at 3 hours, the detection doesn't worsen distinctly. What this means is that the damage spikes and plateaus very quickly and persists until movement returns. So standing and walking for 5 minutes after every 30 to 45 minutes of sitting completely preserves endothelial function. An hour of sitting measurably damages the lining of our leg arteries. 5 minutes of walking every 30 minutes prevents it. The damage is fast. The prevention is simple. So the gap between the two, the hours we sit without standing and walking, is where the cardiovascular risk accumulates. And the endothelial system is only the first system that sitting suppresses. There's an enzyme in our muscle capillaries, the tiniest blood vessels, that clears fat from our blood, and sitting switches that off. Prolonged inactivity reduces this activity by 90% within hours. The enzyme is anchored to the capillary walls of our muscle tissue, and it breaks down triglycerides into fatty acids and glycerol, and allows muscle to use fat as fuel. When the activity of this enzyme drops, triglycerides accumulate in our blood, and the accumulated triglycerides predict heart disease, not cholesterol. Its mechanism has nothing to do with calories. Standing still maintains the activity. Sitting still does not. So it also needs gravity. Mm-hmm. So the next system, what happens to your blood sugar when your leg muscles stop contracting? Muscle is responsible for approximately 80% of the insulin-mediated glucose uptake in our body. This means that insulin causes our body to take up glucose. The glucose transporter that moves glucose from our blood into our muscle cells in response to insulin is done by two independent signals: insulin binding to its receptor and muscle contraction. So during sitting, that contraction signal is totally absent. The muscle then becomes less responsive to insulin, and so insulin sensitivity decreases. Studies have shown that post-meal glucose and insulin levels drop by 24 to 30%, or are elevated by 24 to 30% compared to uninterrupted sitting. So when you just sit, I didn't get that sentence finished fully. So when you sit after a meal, your blood sugar spikes, and so does your insulin. And too much insulin shuts things down and causes diabetes. But when you get up and walk around after a meal, that doesn't happen. The metabolic system that processes our blood sugar performs measurably differently depending on whether we stand up every 20 to 30 minutes or sit continuously. So blood sugar problems then are mostly a sitting problem, not a dietary problem or a genetic problem. They are positional. The muscle that should be cleaning glucose from our blood is not contracting, and the transporter that should be moving glucose into our muscle cells is not being activated by the contraction signal it was designed to receive alongside the insulin signal. Our body was engineered to produce glucose or to process glucose with two signals operating simultaneously, and sitting removes one of the two. The system still works on one signal, yet with much less efficiency. Insulin now has to do the work of two signals by itself. The pancreas compensates by producing more insulin, and the muscles then become less responsive, progressively responsive to each unit of insulin, and this is the clinical definition of insulin resistance, which is the precursor to diabetes. The resistance is not a disease, it's a mechanical consequence. A person who sits for 3 hours after lunch is processing that meal with one signal alone and starting a disease process. A person who stands and walks briefly every 20 to 30 minutes after a meal is processing that meal with both signals and maintaining health. So there's three independent systems damaged by one behavior, three mechanisms, three pathways, three consequences, which are vascular constriction, triglyceride accumulation, and glucose dysregulation, all produced by sitting and all reversed by standing and walking. This reflects a body that was engineered for continuous low-level movement and treats prolonged sitting as abnormal input. All three systems begin failing within the first half hour of uninterrupted sitting. All three quickly recover. So a system that deteriorates in 30 to 45 minutes and recovers in 5 was not designed for prolonged sitting. It was designed for intermittent movement with brief rest. And this is the pattern that every terrestrial mammal has, except the one that invented the chair.
What chair? Oh, the regular chair. I was thinking the, okay.
So there's a fourth, there's a fourth system that's not metabolic, and it's mechanical, and explains why our legs are where the damage concentrates. And that is the pump in our calves that function as a second heart, and sitting it switches that pump off. So our venous system in our legs returns blood to our heart against gravity, and the driving force for that is not the heart, it's the calf muscle pump. The gastrocnemius, I think is the full name, I can't say it, and soleus muscles of our calves compress the deep veins, and each contraction pushes the blood upwards. The pump then generates the venous pressure required to return approximately 70% of our blood volume from below the heart. During sitting, this pump stops, and blood pools in our lower leg veins. And this pushes that fluid into tissues where it's not meant to be, and so our legs swell. The artery walls are deprived of protective shear stress that flowing blood provides and become actively pro-inflammatory. And this is the initial step for atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries. Mm-hmm. So sitting for prolonged periods then is a trigger of atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis. Same, two different words, same thing. A study done in Canada showed that a person who exercises for 30 minutes daily and then sits for 10 hours has a higher mortality risk from the sitting than they offset with the exercise. And we've all been gymnized, thinking that we could sit for hours and go to the gym and work out and it's all good. No, it's not. It's a lie. So the mortality risk associated with sitting for more than 6 hours a day is comparable in magnitude to the risk associated with smoking. We can eliminate sitting, but we can interrupt it. And stay healthy by interrupting it. So now we're going to transition into, after I shift positions here, this plant repels mosquitoes. somewhere in the deep south on a hot evening before the war, which war we don't know, to World War II.
Okay.
A man walked out to his fence line and snapped off a branch with deep purple berries on it. He crushed a handful of the leaves between his palms till they were wet. And then he worked them into the skin of his mule, the flanks and back of his mule, and then along his own arms. And within a few minutes, the cloud of mosquitoes began to thin out and lift away. He had not bought anything. He simply reached into a tangle of brush growing wild and pulled out a defense his family had leaned on for generations. A few hundred miles away, the US government was about to spend years and test more than 40,000 chemicals chasing the very thing that was already growing naturally. This plant is cataloged as an ornamental shrub, and we walk past it on a trail without a second glance. Botanists call it Calica americana, or we know it as the American beautyberry. And I noticed this when we first got here. It has brilliant purple berries. They're beautiful. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's own plant guide still tells what the natives did with this shrub. They boiled the roots and leaves and branches into strong tea and used it in their sweat baths to bring down malarial fevers and ease rheumatism. They boiled the roots to settle dysentery, and they crushed the leaves the same way the farmer did, because they were the ones who taught the farmer, and worked them into the skin of people and animals to drive off both mosquitoes and ticks. Some wove the branches into the bridles and harnesses of their animals so that they would carry that protection with them. Farmers across the deep south learned this from the Native Americans and kept crushing those leaves for mosquito repellent late into the 20th century, and they kept passing down that habit. Now, in 1942, the U.S. had a serious wartime problem. American troops were fighting in the jungles of the Pacific, and the insects carried disease faster than any enemy. The best repellents anyone had at that time lasted 2 hours, and the military wanted 10 hours of protection. So the scientists started testing chemical compounds, 40,000 of them, and in 1946 they found their winner, which we all know as DEET. The same government that ran through 40,000 chemicals to invent a repellent in a lab already had it growing wild across its southern states. So DEET was only the first thing that pushed this plant out of our memory. The second was louder, and it came rolling down the quiet suburban streets on the back of a truck, the fog. The chemical mist sprayed across yards and neighborhoods to knock mosquitoes down. The poison, most of those foggers spray, goes straight back to the flower. Not the American beauty berry, but a different flower. And for centuries, people ground the dried heads of a kind of chrysanthemum into a fine powder to kill insects, and this is called the permethrin daisy, that as we know it now. Ancient Persia knew this, and it's used to sell in American drugstores as plain insect powder, and that flower had a perfect design. It was deadly to insects, gentle on mammals, and broke down fast in sunlight, meaning it evaporated, disappeared. It did its job and was gone. Then the chemists took it apart and rebuilt it. And that is where the quiet damage starts. A fog of synthetic chemicals does not choose a target. It kills the mosquito, and it kills the honeybee, the butterfly, the firefly, the dragonfly, and the spider that eats mosquitoes. So the predators die along with the pests. And once the fog clears, the yard is left more open to mosquitoes than it was before. So the loud solution actually makes the problem much worse. In 2004, a grandfather's tip passed on to a botanist in Mississippi who started studying the beautyberry to see if the folklore was true. In 2006, he reported that the beautyberry leaf could go toe-to-toe with the military's famous spray called DEET. Its compounds landed only 21% below the chemical that took 40,000 tries to find. And it not only turns away just mosquitoes, it turns away ticks and fire ants as well. American beautyberry grows wild from Maryland to Florida and west into Texas. It is a tough, low-care shrub. And then we can go after the mosquitoes at the source by simply filling a 5-gallon bucket about 2/3 full with water and dropping in grass clippings or dead leaves or hay. And as this plant matter ferments, it releases the same carbon dioxide that tells a female mosquito this is a perfect nursery. So then she lays her eggs in that bucket, and we add a mosquito dunk that is sold at hardware stores, and I'm going to look at for that. Now, it's active. This mosquito dunk's active ingredient is a bacteria found in Israel's Negev desert. And that bacterium kills the larvae of the mosquito and leaves the bees, butterflies, fish, frogs, birds, and us untouched with poison.
Okay.
So, American beautyberry, it grows here in Oklahoma. It will be grown on our ranches, without a doubt. We're going to have to start it. I haven't seen any of it around. So, let's see here. Now we're going to shift to the Tao starts of the bed chamber. The sexual body is where we've left off. So I see we're running on 21 minutes here. We'll be done with 45, so everyone can get up and walk.
Yeah.
So imagine two lovers preparing to meet, not with urgency or impulse, but with reverence. The lights are low, their breath slows, there is no rush or performance. Instead, each person approaches the other as one might approach a temple, in silence, in wonder, and in open presence. Because to enter the body of a beloved is not a casual act. It is a passage between worlds, a crossing from the visible to the invisible, from the physical known to the energetic sacred unknown. So our sexual body then is not merely anatomical, it's an energetic temple made of Dantian cauldrons and the Meridian rivers. These structures are very subtle, but they're very real. They transmit energy, they remember touch, they open to the cosmos and root into the earth. So when we are engaged in sexual act, we should be intending or desiring to illuminate the energy body that comes alive during erotic union. The three Dantians are centers of power, consciousness, and transmutation, and understanding offers a new map of the sexual body in which arousal, emotion, and transcendence are not accidental products of pleasure, but specific alchemical processes unfolding through the energetic centers. So the lower Dantian is the cauldron of essence and sexual fire. It's located about 3 finger widths below the belly button. And we've heard from a Japanese guy that it's in the women, it's also physically in the uterus, and the men, it's in the lower, and also in the intestine, descending intestine. But it's also an energetic point about 3 fingers below the belly button. And this cauldron governs the physical body, reproductive fluids, and foundational strength. During arousal, this center is the first to stir, and a subtle heat begins to build, not just in the genitals, but in the entire pelvic basin for both men and women. If sexual union begins with awareness of this center, we gather energy then rather than losing it. Breathing into the center, directing awareness here during foreplay, and sealing this perineum during stimulation all contribute to refining this Jing into Qi. And without attention, this center becomes a drain. With intention, it becomes a furnace. The middle Dantian then is the chamber of emotion and Shen resonance. It's located at the heart center. And this cauldron governs emotion, breath, and the resonance of Shen, the spirit. And this is where sexual energy transforms from purely physical desire into emotional depth, affection, and spiritual communion. During lovemaking, the middle Dantian becomes active as arousal rises. So if the heart is present and open, this energy flows upward and circulates out through the chest. If it's blocked, the energy can stagnate and result in shallow breathing, emotional detachment, or mechanical sex. Couples who breathe together, make eye contact, and touch the chest and upper back intentionally activate the heart field. This dantian radiates warmth, allowing the exchange of Shen. This is where love infuses desire. It's the bridge between the animal and the angelic. It's also the source of forgiveness, emotional release, and vulnerability, all of which are essential for deeper spiritual union. The upper dantian, then, is the portal of awareness and merging. Located at the center of the forehead between the eyebrows, and it's not just there, it goes to the pineal gland. It's the seat of subtle awareness, spiritual perception, and higher Shen. And it's through this gate that we begin to sense the non-dual dimensions of intimacy, the field in which the self and the other, inner and outer, begin to dissolve. And this dantian is activated when stimulation gives way to stillness, when climax is prolonged or transmuted, and when the mind becomes quiet and expanded. The act of sexual union then becomes a form of meditation, and sexual energy becomes pure life. When this dantian awakens, Shen becomes the guide, and sex becomes a portal to the unformed world. Our bodies are not passive structures. They're living currents of flowing energy. And chi does not move randomly. It follows pathways, gates that spiral and interconnect the physical and spiritual dimensions of experience. In sexual cultivation, several meridians become especially significant as they govern not only arousal, but transmutation and ascension into higher consciousness, expanded consciousness. Across the meridians are 8 extraordinary vessels that are deep energetic channels that underlie all physiological movement. And 3 of them are central to erotic practice. And these are the governing vessel, or the dumai, the conception vessel, or the renmai, and the penetrating vessel, or the chongmai. And together they form the internal structure of orgasmic energy flow, retention, and spiritual ascent. And these channels are activated through breath, touch, intention, and synchronized awareness. So the governing vessel, or dumai, rises along the spine, and it retains the jing. It runs along the spine from the perineum up through the sacrum, along the vertebrae, over the back of the head, and ends right here. It's referred to as the sea of yang, the carrier of life's active rising force. In erotic practice, the dumai is central for men that are practicing semen retention. As arousal builds, sexual essence, jing, begins to rise along the spine. And when ejaculation is avoided and the breath is guided upward, this energy is circulated and nourishes the brain, stabilizes the heart, and initiates states of expanded perception. So practices that activate the dumai are spinal pumping, which would be micro movements of the lower back and sacrum during union. Reverse breathing, which means you inhale, instead of expanding your abdomen as you inhale, you contract it and lift your perineum. And you can visualize white light or cool mist rising up the spine. So when this channel is open, a retained orgasm can trigger waves of heat, subtle vibration, or tingling up the back, especially between the shoulder blades and the base of the skull. The conception vessel, or the renmai, is called the womb awakening and the front body chi, and this is the yin counterpart of the dumai. It runs along the front of the body from the perineum up through the lower abdomen, the womb, and the prostate in men, and the heart, and it ends at the bottom of the tongue. This vessel is intimately linked to feminine sexual arousal, womb-based breathing, and the emotional body. It governs women's menstrual cycles, vaginal fluid balance, and the readiness of her inner gates to open. In men, it supports softening, receptivity, and emotional depth. During lovemaking, when the Ren channel becomes active, it becomes active when the breath is full and deep into the belly and chest. And when touch traces the front of the body from the pubic bone to the heart, and vocalization or sound is expressed, such as sighing, humming, or moaning. These expressions stimulate energy flow along the Ren vessel, opening the heart and softening the pelvic floor. And for women, this can lead to a feeling of blossoming in both the womb and the chest. For men, it brings balance and descent of consciousness into the body. So, and then lastly, the penetrating vessel, or the Changmai, is tremor, orgasm, and spiritual fusion. This is known as the sea of blood and ancestral chi, and is the deepest and most primal of the extraordinary channels. It emerges from the same root, however, it rises through the center of the body, penetrating the sexual organs, rising up through the chest and head. And it's important in deep arousal and spiritualized orgasm. It governs tremors, inner pulsing, and whole body energetic eruptions that go beyond the genital area. These waves of energy are spontaneous and unexpected, and are signs that the body is beginning to spiritually fuse with the arousal current. And it's activated when arousal is sustained over long periods without release. Deep pelvic contractions meet full emotional openness, and intent is elevated beyond pleasure to offering, communion, or surrender. This channel is also where sexual trauma or ancestral patterns can be stored. So when it's awakened, it can bring bliss, memory release, and emotional purification. Practicing with it requires gentleness, spaciousness, and reverence. When it opens, it brings a flood of power and integration that no technique alone can produce. That's where we're going to stop with that tonight.
Wow. Okay. And do we have a third subject?
Nope, that was three. And
Okay.
I didn't prepare a fourth.
All righty. So that's
After preparing the damage that sitting does, I was like, I don't want to go for an hour anymore.
so I guess that would be an advantage of the chair, is that it allows you to stay a little bit longer, which is
get
the
more
point
damage.
of how bad. Yeah, that's I mean the advantage in some sense, because of course then you don't want to be sitting down longer. You want to be being forced to move around and stuff. So. Well, that's a lot of information and a lot of stuff to take in, a lot of stuff to look at, and hopefully motivate you to get off the comfort zone, get out of the comfort. And the way I look at it is, just zooming out, all of this is about this consumerist, comfort-focused lifestyle that the modern world has given us. Is the more comfortable you are, not let alone all the health issues that come along, there's this thing about how boring and how just I don't know, even how stupid people can become. They don't have any adventure to tell. They don't have any story to tell. Any good story I could ever tell, there was never comfort involved in that story.
Yeah.
There was never a good bed or a good chair. I have so many good stories about me going out barefoot and all the way to Guatemala and seeing volcanoes erupt and being caught by the military and be taken over by whatever. And so many stories, and none of them ever involved comfort.
Yeah.
And so that's so you either live your life, to have experiences, to go out into nature, to do something in the world, to change this world, which is what we're doing with Aloha Nidau Living. Or you just look for the comfort of being in a chair.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to say, instead of saying none of them involve comfort, let's say none of them involve modern comfort, because comfort can come in other ways than chairs, cushion, shoes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, maybe distinct. Yeah, this is just the semantics issue. The pleasure, because we speak a lot about pleasure. So
Yeah,
not having comfort doesn't mean not having pleasure, not at all.
exactly.
Yeah,
I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. And that's, we have the two associated with each other. Comfort, no,
Yeah,
comfort does not equal pleasure.
yeah, in this context, I would totally separate them. And it's like, you can have, I mean, but because you might, what a pleasure it was for me just climbing a mountain, getting to the pleasure that making the summit produces, just being able to, it's like, it's the orgasm where you finally make it to the summit and you get to look at all that view, and all that effort you were doing is over. That's a huge pleasure.
Yeah.
But it did not come from comfort. I was not comfortable going up the mountain.
Yeah, no. Yeah. There's no way, shape, or form you could ever include comfort in that.
Yeah, not even even if you have a nice tent, you don't ever have comfort when you're mountain climbing. Yeah. And that's one of the funny things that you're always like, when you're up there, you're just thinking, this is such a stupid thing. Because I'm so uncomfortable. It's cold. The tent is uncomfortable. The food wasn't great. I cannot fall asleep easily. This is such a bad idea. And then you come back, and there's like, and then you get sick. You come. I mean, when you are too comfortable, it starts making you sick. So these adventures and this activity of avoiding comfort, like, and the comfort of a chair, it's what keeps you healthy. So, right, it's what keeps you alive. And
yeah,
so this was a wonderful piece of information. What are we going to do next week?
Well, next week we'll start with actually how gardening does not age your body. what good it actually does to your body, which is going to be very important. I mean, I'll bring up with that the myth of the Bible that we were cast out of the Garden of Eden, so nobody wants to garden. But how it actually, we'll find out how through gardening we actually are truly connected to all of life.
Wow. Okay.
So
connection, gardening connects us through all of life.
Yeah. So what gardening, the beauty gardening does to your body, or something like that.
Alrighty.
And then we'll go into another plant or something in regards to food freedom.
Okay.
Food and health freedom, right? So.
Okay, and we're doing this
and more Taoist arts of the bedchamber too.
Okay, more Taoist arts of the bedchamber, and that's a little piece we leave at the end, and that we don't announce as much because we don't want to get censored as we once did.
Yeah.
And but it's a little spice at the end for everyone.
Yeah.
And which I like a lot because it brings all this Taoist symbolism, and it's always great.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's the invitation for next week at 8:45 Central Standard Time. Hope to see you there. And if you can support us, or if you ever want to join Aloha Ini Dao Living, you can do so. Aloha Ini Dao Living with 1A.com. Aloha Ini, they share the same A. Aloha Ini Dao Living.com. That's our website. Please visit and please join. And if you don't join us, well, you can make something like what we're doing, but is there anything like we're doing? Doesn't look like it. So that's what we need to gather our resources and the people to do this. Thank you for being here. Something else? Want to say goodbye?
Goodbye is it. See you next
Okay.
week.
See you next week already. See you next week, everybody.